It's 3:47 a.m. You wake up in complete darkness, and your hand is already moving toward the light switch before your eyes have opened. You don't remember deciding to check. You just needed to know something was still there. That reflex is older than language, older than farming, older, possibly, than our species. And the strangest part is that it wasn't built for a light switch at all. So why does a brain shaped by a world without electricity still panic in the dark until it finds a glow? Let's rewind further than you think. Imagine standing at the mouth of a cave, somewhere in the long stretch of time before history had a name. It's cold. The wind smells like wet bark and old smoke. Inside, a few bodies lie curled together, and in the middle of them, under a soft gray blanket of ash, there is one point of red no bigger than the tip of your thumb. That coal is the entire camp. Not the food, not the tools, not the shelter, the coal. Because if it dies, the warmth dies. The cooked meal dies. The dry hides die. The soft edge of light that holds back the dark dies with it. And here's the part that has been almost erased from the way we tell this story. These humans could not simply light another one. For most of our deep past, fire was not an appliance. It was not a match in a drawer. It was a fragile, borrowed thing that a group had to keep alive with their hands, their attention, and their sleep. The archaeology says something almost unbelievable. Deep inside Wonderwerk Cave in South Africa, in sediments dated between roughly 1.79 and 1.07 million years ago, researchers have found burned bone and heat-altered stone patterned in ways that natural grass fire struggles to explain. Something walked into that cave with heat. And yet the earliest evidence anyone has confidently interpreted as a human actually making fire, striking flint against iron pyrite on a buried land surface at Barnham in Britain, is only around 400,000 years old. Read that gap again. Humans may have been using fire for more than 1 million years before they could reliably create it. That is not a small footnote. That is an entire way of being human that we have almost forgotten. Picture the moment fire first entered a human life. Not as a spark from a hand, as a disaster on the horizon. Lightning splits a tree. Grass hisses, animals run, smoke leans with the wind. And somewhere on a ridge, a small group of hominins does something no other animal does. They don't run. They watch. They wait for the fire to weaken. They read the wind. And when the danger has just barely passed, someone steps into the black ground where roots are still glowing and pulls out a single smoldering branch. That is not the discovery of fire. That is the discovery that fear can be calibrated. That danger has a shape, and if you learn its edges, you can carry a piece of it home. You feel that carrier's heartbeat as clearly as your own. The branch is heavier than expected. The heat presses against the cheek but not the back. Ash hides burning ground under bare feet, and every step is a negotiation. Not too fast, or the flame collapses. Not too slow, or the ember cools past the point of return. Somewhere inside you, that calculation is still running. It's what you feel merging onto a highway. It's what you feel standing at the top of a staircase carrying a child. Controlled proximity to danger. The same nervous system, wearing different clothes. Now the group is back at camp with a living piece of the sky in their hands. And here is where the sophistication no one tells you about begins. Because keeping that flame alive was not the job of one strong hunter. It was a distributed act of intelligence, spread across an entire group and stretched across time. Someone had to know which wood held moisture. Someone had to notice, hours before dusk, that the fuel pile wouldn't survive the night. Someone had to bury coals under ash in exactly the right way so that oxygen slowed and heat lingered. Someone had to be awake when everyone else was asleep. Anthropologists studying the Hadza in Tanzania discovered something quietly beautiful about this. When they measured sleep across the camp, they found that in over 200 hours of monitoring, there were almost no moments when every adult was asleep at the same time. Not because anyone was assigned to guard, because human beings naturally wake at different times. Chronotypes vary. Older adults stir before dawn, younger ones drift later. Together, without a schedule, the camp is almost never blind. When I first read that study, I had to sit with it for a while, because it means the night watch we imagine as a job may have been something older and stranger, a side effect of being human together. A group's mind, awake in shifts, without anyone ever being told to stay up. That is what was really guarding the ember. Not a person, a pattern. And here is where the belief most of us grew up with starts to crack. We were taught that fire was an invention, a single moment, a caveman, a spark, a cutaway shot to civilization. But the evidence tells a very different story. Fire was not invented once, it was learned in layers. First, humans recognized burned landscapes as opportunity. Then they approached them. Then they carried fire home. Then they fed it. Then they built repeated hearths. Then, much, much later, they figured out how to summon it from stone and wood. Each of those steps is a separate act of intelligence, and most of them leave almost nothing behind for archaeology to find. Think about that. A wooden fire drill decays in a few seasons. Ash disperses in a rainstorm. The gesture that saved a coal at midnight leaves no trace at all, which means the deepest technology of our ancestors may be the technology we can never dig up. It didn't live in the flame. It lived inside the group. And that is the part that changes how you see yourself. Because if fire lived inside the group, then losing it was never just a physical event. It was a social one. Imagine waking one morning, pressing your hand into the ash the way you always have, and feeling nothing. No warmth, no red. Just cold gray powder and the sound of your own breathing. You feel the temperature of the camp change before anyone speaks. Someone whose job it was to add wood in the small hours didn't. Maybe they were sick, maybe they were tired, maybe they simply drifted deeper into sleep than usual. And now, before the meal, before the drying of hides, before anything else can happen, the group has to decide what kind of group it is. Do they blame? Do they move? Do they walk in cold rain toward the thin column of smoke rising from a neighboring camp and ask for fire? Because asking is not neutral. To ask for fire is to admit you couldn't keep your own. It is to hand another group a small piece of leverage over you. This is the part of the story that has been quietly erased. Cooperation, in the deep past, was not a moral virtue. It was infrastructure. A neighbor was a backup ember. A relationship was a redundancy, and the safest group was not the strongest one. It was the one with the most working relationships. Anthropologists who spent years with the Ju/hoansi in southern Africa saw a version of this in modern form. When a new camp is made, one fire is kindled. From that fire, brands are carried to each family hearth, so the camp becomes a small constellation of lights, all born from a single ignition. If one family's hearth dies, another's saves it. The camp is engineered against the failure of any single flame. What we're about to uncover is just one piece of a much larger story. One will follow across 3 of these. Because here is the twist the evidence keeps whispering. Around 930,000 to 813,000 years ago, according to a controversial genomic model, our ancestors may have passed through a severe population bottleneck. For a stretch of deep time, the effective breeding population of our lineage may have been astonishingly small. The scale is still debated. The cause is genuinely unknown, and there is no direct evidence that fire, or the failure to make it, caused that crisis. But the chronology is haunting. That bottleneck sits in a window when some populations could use fire, but no one anywhere could yet reliably make it. A time when the difference between life and slow disappearance may have been a single coal, a single carrier, a single group that kept its ember alive when the rain came and the neighbors were too far away. We came very close to something we don't fully understand, and we survived it. At least in part because a species of ape had learned to organize itself around a fragile red point of light. Now come back to your own room. Look at what surrounds you. A charger by the bed. A phone at 1% that made your chest tighten yesterday. A spare key in a drawer. Food in the freezer you'll probably never need. A friend you call the reliable one. The one who always has a plan. The one you feel calmer standing next to when something goes wrong. None of those objects are ancient, but the feeling attached to them is. Your brain still carries this program. The program that says, do not let the system supporting you reach 0. Do not lose the thing you cannot easily replace. Trust the person who prepares before anyone asks. Sit closer to warm, localized light than to bright overhead glare. Feel in your body that being excluded from a group is not just sad, it is dangerous. You've never thought about this, but you've lived it. Every time you check the stove twice. Every time you count the exits. Every time you feel oddly grateful to someone who did something small, quietly, before you knew you needed it. That is the ember logic, still running under everything. We solved darkness. We solved cold. We gave every person their own light, their own screen, their own private heat, and in doing so, we quietly dissolved the circle that once made all of it necessary. The room got brighter. The gathering became optional. The ancient hearth didn't vanish. It just stopped being visible. But the anxiety it managed, the ancient math of avoiding zero, that stayed. It moved into your battery icon, into your locked doors, into the way your hand reaches at 3:47 a.m. for a light you don't strictly need. The sophistication of our ancestors was never in a single dramatic invention. It was in the refusal to let something small and vital die. Maintenance is intelligence stretched across time. Care sometimes looks less like affection and more like someone quietly making sure the coals are still warm before they lie down. You've been carrying this longer than you realize. But there is something the firekeepers themselves did not yet know. Somewhere in the long dark before Barnham, a pair of hands finally learned to make the sky's power appear from two ordinary stones. And the moment that happened, the ember stopped belonging to everyone. The spark belonged to the one who knew. That's next. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to Back Times, hit the bell icon, and share this video with someone who loves history.